At some point in the retreat, we always like to, just as the Buddha did, like to talk about the practice of dana. And this, most of you probably got in the literature and you saw the flyer out there about dana, but dana is a very central part of the teachings of the Buddha. In fact, it's the first teaching that the Buddha offered to lay people like us. Whenever they came to hear teachings, he always talked about the importance of cultivating in our hearts the practice of generosity. Dana means generosity. And in the larger sense, generosity is one of those qualities that reminds us of two things. One, that our hearts can experience a lot of joy in this life. And two, that every moment is a creative possibility to plant seeds of either misery or joy, depending on what we do with our minds. His suggestion was that because the practice of generosity is so gladdening to the heart that we should, in every which way in our life, every way possible, we should, when that impulse arises, we should practice it. So that's, in general, the practice of generosity. He talked about when people practice generosity in their lives, they can experience the joy and the thought of giving, and I'm sure all of you have had before when you've had that thought of offering something. You can experience joy in the act of giving, and then joy in the memory of having given. And in particular, he talked about how important generosity is. He highlighted the fact that if we knew how important generosity was in terms of gladdening the heart, freeing the heart from its sense of selfishness and contractedness, he says we would not let a single meal pass without sharing it. That's really the spirit of giving. So the way that operated in terms of the context of what we're doing here for the last 2,600 years or so, a monastic system was set up for the monastics to, as their practice of dana, to offer teachings and support to the lay community, to each other and to the lay community. That was their practice of dana, to live a life of dana, of offering themselves to the benefit of other beings. And always the monastic communities were required to live in very close proximity. Any notion of monastics living in some kind of removed life is an illusion. But to live in a close enough proximity to allow the lay community, as their practice of dana, to provide for the requisites of the nuns and the monks to support them. So that this cybernetic or this interdependent, this interwoven giving and receiving between the lay community and the monastics would create this field of generosity, providing everyone an opportunity to grow in a liberated heart, and also provide opportunities for people to learn the Dharma, to practice, and for the monks and nuns to have their basic needs met. And the way that teachings have been offered have been in that style for 2,600 years, and that's why they're alive today. Now, as I mentioned the first night, I think, now many of the people who are offering teachings as my practice of dana, as our practice of dana, are lay people. And yet we still, because we value this system of giving and receiving, I come here only having my airfare taken care of, and my room and my board. And I offer the teachings freely. That's my practice of dana. And the invitation at all the retreats, and I've been pretty much supported, at least 60% of my support. I've had to supplement it because it's still a grand experiment in the West. But I have mostly been supported by the generosity of people who come to retreats. And so we've created this opportunity for me to put out my begging bowl, and other teachers as well. I'm just representing this teacher's seat in this case. Make as my practice of dana the teachings and whatever support I can offer. And the invitation is for you to consider in your heart how much you or how little you are able to or want to support my requisites. And then if you feel to, in a completely voluntary way, to practice generosity, to offer something that actually feels generous, that is not just a tip that you kind of reach in and throw a buck in the, I mean, if that's all you had, that's fine. But to really consider, as a practice of generosity, to make some kind of offering. And not too much that you feel then regretful that you offered, or too little that it doesn't feel generous. But to really consider your situation, your conditions, and make it a practice, make it an experiment. It's part of what we do here. And both receiving it has been my practice, not knowing when I go to offer teachings. Not too many people go someplace to work, in a sense, and not know what they'll be offered. But it's been my practice, and it's been a beautiful practice, and I've been a yogi so much, as many of you know, that I've spent years of my life doing retreats like this and longer. And at first I didn't really quite understand that, the spirit of dana, but in offering dana to teachers and starting to feel the gratitude, feel the support, feel the movement of my heart, I started to actually not just appreciate more what's offered, but then I started to feel that joy of being able to offer. And I'm not saying you should feel what I felt. You'll just find your own way. And it can feel a little awkward at first. And we're so trained at the fee-for-service model, what kind of price do you put on it, that it's a little bit different to actually look into our heart and then to offer something as a gift. And if we're able to, and know that it's completely voluntary. I'll just say that I'll just thank you in advance for any support that I receive, and mostly thank you for your practice. And then if Stephen wants to add something, I'm more than happy. Thank you. So that's the spirit of dana. And I hope you really enjoy this practice of dana on retreats, but more enjoy the practice of dana as one of the paramis, one of the ways that we can really purify our heart, and that can really come to a place of perfection in our lives, where so many of our thoughts are about giving. And that's not always the case these days. It's a lot of fear, a lot of worry, a lot of clinging, and that can really change, and we can start to live in a little bit more trust. There was one more thing. The Buddha talked about the evolution of our practice of generosity. And you can kind of see how you're unfolding in that practice. And he talked about how at first we give in a way that he called beggarly giving that which we don't really care about, and we don't care whether we want to get rid of it. And then it's more princess or princessly giving, where you give that which you value, but it's still pretty easy for you to part with. And then he talked about queenly or kingly giving, where you give that which you value the most, that you most be likely to cling to, and you come to this place where you can give that you feel so much inner sufficiency that you can give freely. I'm not saying you will discover any of that in the practice of teacher dana, but you will in the practice of dana in your life, in the different ways that you can practice generosity. So I hope you enjoy that, and thanks for listening.